Today, this morning, Trump made the following tweet, and I'll read it briefly. He says this: a president of the United States must have full immunity, without which it would be impossible for him or her to properly function. Any mistake, even if well intended, would be met with an almost certain indictment by the opposing party at term end. Even events that cross the line must fall under a total immunity, or it will be years of trauma trying to determine good from bad. There must be certainty. That kind of rhetoric, is it fascistic? Is it something we should be concerned about? Is it something that Biden was right to point out as fascistic, or is it crying wolf?
If we look at like Schedule F, I don't know if you guys have heard about that one, but the plan that Donald Trump was trying to implement at the end of his term, which would basically strip job protections from career officials and policy roles throughout like the bureaucracy and make it a lot easier for the president to just fire like civil servants. You get like a Russia situation where you find people who aren't necessarily qualified but are loyal to the leader, finding themselves in really important positions that should be filled by someone who has a genuine desire for that field, has been in there for decades, has worked with multiple administrations. That's what you want. But, you know, if Schedule F were to work as probably intended, and I mean, as Wick mentioned before, you know, Trump's tweeting about how the president should be immune from this and immune from that. And he's basically asking for the country to be his own company where you're fired. And it's like, well, when you leave, we have to pick up the pieces of whatever mess you make with this sort of like businessman running of the nation. So being able to just fire people from different parts of the executive branch, it's just not safe for our country. We need people who have stood the test of time, stood the test of administrations, who are experienced. And I think trying to implement Schedule F is a prime example of this authoritarian aspect of fascism, where it's just, I'm in this bitch, I do what I want, I run the show, and you know, if you even seem slightly unloyal to me, I don't give a damn about how much you've done, what you know, what you've experienced, what you offer to the country. If it's you versus me, you're out. Fuck whatever happens to the country as a result. So that's a domestic policy example. It wasn't implemented, but it was planned.
Schedule F is actually a good remedy because the entirety of the Afghanistan occupation for 20 years, the entirety of the military brass has been lying to the executive up and down the chain, saying that the Afghanistan army or police or whatever was far more competent and far more existing than it actually was. Where they, on paper, there was a sizable force, and in reality, they either didn't show up, didn't exist, or the amount of funding that was supposed to go to them never reached them. So when we're talking about people in competence,
yeah, I want to.
But competency doesn't matter as to whether or not it's fascism.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to address his
I mean,
thing.
it can, because fascism like kind of lines up with like nepotism and cronyism. But
yeah. But the issue is that the United States military-industrial complex is nothing but cronyism and capitalism. So having Schedule F to remove these fucking incompetent people that are just there to get a paycheck and agree with the military-industrial complex is not a bad thing, and it's not fascistic.
Wait, do you think, hold on quick, do you guys think it'd be more or less fascist if a rule was put in place that the president couldn't fire generals or remove generals in the military?
That would be.
But didn't fire?
Yeah, can't get rid of generals. Like there's like an established entrenched group of generals that gets to basically be a general.
I would say less.
You would think that's less fascistic?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Like
basically what you would want to do is you would want to have them be like congressional appointees, or you would want to have some kind of like balance of power appointment system, instead of, if you just say he can hire and fire whoever he wants whenever he wants, then he can just hire and fire simps at all times.
Just to make clarity, are you saying that there's this group of generals that can never be fired by anyone, or they can never be fired by the president? Because there's a difference, right?
Yeah,
if you're saying that they're going to be appointed for life, like the Supreme Court and their generals, then I have some issues. But if you're saying, hey, the executive branch is not allowed to just willy-nilly fire these guys, they have to get a congressional approval, and it has to go through a process, I don't think that's fascistic. I think that's much less fascistic. So it depends on what
I think. So I disagree with that. I think that I think it's more fascistic, because civilian control of the military is one of the greatest like differentiations between a more authoritarian country or a less authoritarian country, right? This is the reason why military juntas, right, when they gain power and they take over an entire area, it's because they have tremendous amounts of institutional control and leadership that they're able to exert control that exceeds the civilian capability to restrain it. And if you had like union job protections for the military, if you had union job protections for the heads of these governments, like that are comparable with this, I mean, you're essentially having the people elect a president that is the civilian government that doesn't have control of the military.
Yeah, we said give it to Congress.
What do you think the Congress is if not
Congress is also civilians?
Here's the problem, though, is like saying that it's not fascistic. It's like the problem is that like I think Trump is kind of showing holes in the game that we didn't think were possible, right? Normally, presidents weren't that big of a threat to the proper functioning and competence of a military. But when you look at like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, like vehicles improperly fueled because soldiers are selling them, like competence is from the top down. And when a guy can fire any general and replace him with a crony who might not be as experienced or as knowledgeable, and his only, defining trait is I'm loyal to Trump and I'm a ride or die behind my boy Trump. That's not actually effective for this country. It would probably be best if people who, it could be either Congress or it could be people within the Department of Defense that can properly allocate, okay, this general should be fired, this person should be fired, that person should be hired. But for the president at any point in time to just fire them willy-nilly and say, you're gone, especially with a guy like Donald Trump, I don't see
you don't want to bomb these people that I want you to bomb? You're gone. You're fired.
Do you guys think that the existence of the president itself is fascistic?
No.
Okay. So
why not?
Because
what should the president have the power to? What should the president
hold on. I want to address this. I want to address this specifically. Yeah, I want to address this specifically, and then I want to go back to Ukraine. Actually, the reason why the office of the president is not fascistic, no matter what fucking Twitter commies say, is because there is, as a matter of fact, the office of the president is one of the least fascistic executive positions ever created. Reason being, because there's term limits, there's a plan for a peaceful transfer of power, there's balance of power between multiple branches, and there's limits to his authority that he can be impeached and potentially criminally charged for. So do you have any rebuttals to that?
No, I do. I know. Hold on. I do. I'm not. So you're talking about the American government generally. I'm talking specifically with the executive branch. Because you're saying, well, Congress should just be able to fire them. Can you name me one power that would be that you could just like give to Congress from the president, or that would make it more fascistic? I mean, it seems like anything that you give the president under this kind of theory of like, well, we should just give the power to hire and fire everybody away from the president and give that to Congress. I mean, what in your mind, what can the president do that would be more or less fascistic?
So let me kind of tell you my worst case scenario, and this is where you kind of build. You have to war game politics for if the worst, most malevolent motherfucker seizes power. Right? That's how you have to war game this shit. So the reason why I disagree with you guys about whether or not the president should have sole power to hire and fire generals is actually, you said that the generals were lying to the civilians about how Afghanistan was going.
No, it was Syria. Well, both actually. Yes, you're right.
So it was known in the military for decades. I knew that the Afghan war was lost in 2011, and we still stayed for that long. And basically, it was a running joke in Vice News that they're like, this is what winning looks like. I think it came out in like 2016, where they showed like the Afghan army wildly incompetent, wildly corrupt, everything's stolen, nothing's laying down, half the people are high on heroin, et cetera, et cetera. I think the civilians knew what was going on in Afghanistan. They just wanted the general to say that at press conferences because they didn't want the American public to really know that we dumped 2,000 lives and $2 trillion into Afghanistan with nothing to show for it. So I don't think that has anything to do with the military. Sorry, real quick. Let me just finish this one point. So with the generals, though, what I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want the generals to give bad news to the president where like Trump is like, hey, Waziristan is kind of a pain in the ass. Let's go ahead and hit it with nukes. Let's just glass that entire part of the planet. And the first series of the generals are like, hey, that's a bad idea. Pakistan's a nuclear power. Afghanistan is a destable country. We don't want to glass these people. And then he's like, okay, well, I have the power to hire and fire. So fuck you, you're fired. Find me the next guy who will do exactly what I want.
So the reason why Schedule F isn't fascist in the way you think it is because Trump isn't there to put more power into the state or more power into himself. He wants to dissolve the FBI and the ATF and move their funding and their people and spread them out into the other agencies or entities or institutions. And decentralize a juggernaut that's immortal with infinite power and money that can just fuck you up from anywhere. So he thinks that is a corrupt entity and that it is beyond reform. Schedule F is what he wants to do is restore some type of faith in the system that a lot of people think is corrupt. That's what he wants to do.
Okay, I mean, when we look at the root of where that motivation is coming from, I mean, this is the same guy that allegedly, according to James Comey, asked James Comey to be loyal to him, right? So we got an acting seated president basically like asking the FBI director and like a high-ranking member of the Department of Justice to basically be loyal to him and to give Mike Flynn a pass.
Yeah, I would rebuttal.
My thing is, where is the motivation for Schedule F coming from? When we start talking about, is Trump fascist, is his rhetoric fascist?
His rivals.
Where is the motivation for these kinds of decisions coming from when we look at the battles he's been through? Like even him saying, oh yeah, on day one, he was joking, but it was a joke coming from a real place. Like this is a man fighting multiple legal battles. This is a guy who basically told the feds, I do what the hell I want with these documents. Y'all ain't getting shit. This is a guy, when you look at his motivations and the behavior he's been involved in, we have to bring it into context, right?
Yeah.
Why is he trying to do Schedule F? When we look at his relationship with the Department of Justice, it's clear like he's got real beef with these, institutions. And obviously he's going to do whatever he can to decentralize these institutions, to break them apart, to move this person there and move that person there. And y'all, it's all...
By the way, y'all can make arguments for why what he's doing is good. You can make arguments for why certain policies the Napoleonic system. He was like wildly influential in standardizing French education and making sure that the French were like a literate society. Now, he also invaded shitloads of Europe and got millions of people killed, but the lycée system that he instituted was obviously positive. So you can say like, hey, I personally think that the FBI and, these other three-letter agencies are beyond redemption, and therefore I like it when Trump said, I think he's the only person with enough balls to stand up to this corner of the establishment and rip it apart. But I'm still going to tell you that when you look at it is a colossus. Our federal government is a colossus. A lot of those institutions exist for a reason, and a lot of the vilification of them is flowery and bullshit compared to their actual institutional function.
So you could almost call it a Leviathan, perhaps. Right?
Yes, you could. Sorry, I was looking for that. No, it's
fine. And this is the reason I push back against a lot of lefties who say, "Oh, why doesn't Biden do something about Roe v. Wade? He should just do an executive order and override all the branches of the government in order to implement our will." Is because it's not something a democracy does. You don't just get to even if what you want to do is good, even if what you want to do is a great good, you don't get just to overrule everything and say, I am the boss and you are going to follow my rules. He's not a king. And I think, in a really real sense, and I'll let you respond, Lactoid, I promise, that Trump wants to be king. Just straight up.
I think this is the best argument.